Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This episode is basically an opinion piece, a review piece about Sins of Our Mother. This is a Netflix special about the Lori Vallow Daybell, Chad Daybell case, and it's coming from the view of the son, Colby Ryan. So, copyright disclaimer, I'm going to be reviewing this Netflix series. I'm going to be putting my thoughts and opinions. This is transformative. Also, I want to let you know there's going to be spoilers, and this is a true crime video, so it's not made for children. I do recommend this limited edition Netflix series, Sins of Our Mother. It's in 3 parts, and I'm going to come at it assuming that you already know this case, and if you don't, there's a whole bunch of YouTube channels that cover it. I cover it here on my channel in great detail. All the different parts, all the different players, all the different preliminary hearings, the transcripts, the body cam videos, it's all reviewed here on my channel. So I'm not going to be going over every little detail. I'm going to be pointing out this series, what new things come out in it, and give my opinions. So let's get into it. It opens on the heartbreaking body cam of Charles Vallow speaking with the police about his concerns for the welfare of his kids and of himself from his wife, Lori Vallow. And he says, she's just lost her mind. And it's sad that, in my opinion, he was maybe not taken seriously because he's a man. And as this is Colby's story, told from his point of view, he's interviewed regarding Lori, talking about how she's still in fantasy land. I also want to note for the record that most of the people here that are interviewed have already given public statements. Anything that they say in this series can be used, I wouldn't say against them, but can be brought up when they're on the stand. It can be brought up as a previous statement. So you always want to be careful doing interviews before trials that come in, because either side can pick at what you say if it's not consistent with what you say on the stand. Now, granted, what you say on a Netflix special isn't under oath, but it doesn't look good if you say one thing on a Netflix special and then say another thing on the stand. Defensive, that's how she called her previous stance, defensive Janice Cox, mother of Lori Vallow, and Colby, her grandson. They're filmed looking through boxed up photos of Lori and the family, and Janice talks about her own ability for, in my opinion, compartmentalization. And she says, quote, "I have to think about Lori like she was and then not think about her now. I got it very divided in my head." Janice Cox goes on to talk about her family, and she recalls all her children pictured here. She talks about how Alex, her son Alex, was, quote, super funny. I want to note, why is there no mention of their daughter Stacy? This is Melanie's mother. It's just odd to me that she gives the ranking of her children in age and birth and then just totally neglects to mention Stacy. Now, I don't know if Netflix cut that out. That's possible. You never know with the editing. Janice talks about how all her kids were raised in the LDS Mormon religion, and Dad Barry Cox said that Lori would call him a spiritual giant, and he implies that now she's been taken captive by Satan. Ex-sister-in-law Annie Cushing, she's the sister of Joe Ryan and thus Lori's ex-sister-in-law, talks about Lori's marriage to her second husband, Joe Ryan. She says that Lori had inclination to be super spiritual way before Chad, like God told her she would go on the Wheel of Fortune. Colby goes on to say that Joe Ryan was sweet and outgoing in the beginning, but he became abusive to Colby over time. According to Colby, everything he did annoyed Joe, and he began harshly disciplining him. And then Annie says that she asked Lori if Joe had been abusive to her, and that Lori said yes, and Annie wanted Lori to leave Joe Ryan. Colby recounts telling his mother at age 8 about what Joe had done to him, essay, and Colby now says that he feels that telling his mother ruined her life, and that was kind of a breaking point for her. We're shown the video of Alex Cox at a comedy club doing stand-up routine regarding the attack, the pedo attack, which in my opinion is odd as all get out. Can you imagine if you later on go and were to see that your uncle's doing a stand-up routine about how he attacked your stepfather over something like this, or even ex-stepfather? It's just odd as all get out. This family, in my opinion, is odd AF. Colby said that Charles Vallow met Lori after her divorce from Joe from being a client in the salon, and that Charles quit drinking and he joined the Mormon church to be with Lori. And Colby said Charles Vallow offered Lori and the family financial security, and that Charles was a positive influence in their lives. And he talks many times about him looking at Charles as a father figure. And even Lori's mother Janice liked Charles, his southern ways, and that he was fit and that he was financially stable. And then JJ is born. He is the grandson of Kay and Larry Woodcock, the nephew of Charles Vallow, and he was a special needs child. He had autism. And since his parents weren't able to take care of him, they decided they were going to raise JJ. And Colby said when JJ was born that he thought that them taking JJ into the family in 2013 would be a lot of struggle because of his autism. But everyone falls head over heels in love with JJ. And Tylee ends up taking over a nurturing role over her little brother, JJ. And according to Colby, religion became more important to Lori even before Chad. Colby likens it to idolatry, that slowly all the photos become temples and things like that. So Lori begins hearing voices telling her to move to Kauai. So she and Charles up and they moved to Kauai. Arguably, around this time, Lori's mentally unwell, leaning towards idolatry and zealotry. Lori's friend from Kauai, April Raymond, who met her at the Honolulu branch of the LDS Church, is interviewed. She's another person that's already been interviewed, and tells how Lori said that Charles was not her spiritual equal. So while in Kauai, Lori was becoming frustrated and she wanted a partner who was a spiritual dynamo, and her beliefs were becoming more extreme. Colby begins dating Kelsey, and they get married, and he begins attending Christian church with her instead of the Mormon church, and that did not please his mother, and Colby said that Lori began competing with Kelsey for his attention. Colby said that Lori and her brother, Alex Cox, began listening to podcasts, and after Colby's wedding, this is a picture of Colby's wedding, Lori was in survivalist mode. Lori seemed genuinely frightened about what she thought was the upcoming apocalypse, and both Colby and Annie Cushing talk about Lori's terror. Both Lori and her brother were listening to Melanie Gibbs' Feel the Fire podcast, and Colby said that both he and Tylee thought the podcasts were weird. Zulema Pastenes and Melanie Gibb are brought into the story. Colby said he was happy. He didn't understand what was going on, but he was happy that Lori finally had some friends. Lori meets Chad at a Preparing a People conference. Now, note a forensic psychologist is interviewed for this Netflix series to talk about Chad Daybell. And in my opinion, I'm guessing that so as not to have any new witnesses testify and mess with any upcoming trials. You wouldn't want someone that's actually going to get on the stand and talk about, hey, I've met with Chad Daybell, or I've reviewed his files and here's my opinion. So they just use some rando, which is just fine. So this person is going to talk about what he thinks is going on in the mind of Chad Daybell. And also note that quite a few people that are in this series have already made some public statements, talked to the press, gave interviews, like Janice Cox has, Annie Cushing has, and she's done podcasts. Colby's done podcasts. Julie Rowe has made statements. So many of these folks that are willing to talk have already made statements. I would assume, since this is Colby's Netflix special and he's obviously given some pictures to use and videos, I'm assuming Colby got paid well for this. I don't know, and I guess it's not my business to know whether the other folks were paid for their interviews, but if they were, then that'll also be brought up at trial. If the state is going to use you as a witness, they just don't like if you've given statements, interviews, things like that, and got paid for them. Because then the defense could turn around and say that you said something just for the money. So the forensic psychologist, John Matthias, talks about Chad Daybell setting baptismal records and his mission trips as a Mormon. And one of Chad's friends recalls him as a gentle, quieter Bob Ross type. He discusses Chad's near-death experience, leading him to believe that his veil was torn, allowing him to be able to access other worlds, and how Chad began to think he was a prophet. He talks about how Chad married the first woman he dated, Tammy, and how they had 5 kids together. And then Julie Rowe is interviewed. If saying no comment is worse than a comment, I'm just going to say no comment. Yeah, so Julie Rowe is interviewed. She says she has prophetic gifts and has had several past lives. She talks about how Chad published her first 5 books, and she talks about Chad boxing in people and ranking people and essentially saying that that's of Satan. We hear about how Rexburg, Idaho is thought to be the New Jerusalem, and Chad's books are taken as scripture, and how he would lead the apocalypse, and that Lori also believed that his books are more than fiction. April Raymond tells of Lori saying there was a demon living inside Charles and that she was waiting for the demon to die. And she says that Lori told her the demon's name was Ned Snyder. All of a sudden, Colby said that Lori told him that Charles has been cheating for years. And Colby confronted Charles, who said she's out of her mind. And Colby doesn't believe Charles. And he said that Charles was acting like a guilty man. That's what he thought at the time. And Charles reached out to the Cox family, and Colby dismissed him. Colby didn't read any of the emails Charles sent, including the attachments. And Adam Cox recalled, "My whole family cut him off." So Adam Cox was the only one to take Charles's calls. And Alex had, at this point, removed Charles's truck from the airport when Charles had gone out of town on a trip, and Alex Cox had removed all Charles's stuff from the house. I think this was new to know that Alex was the one who had done it. And we get to see little bits of texts where Lori is directing Alex to Charles's truck, ILD in the middle row. So there's some things here in the documentary where I don't know if Netflix mocked it up from court records or from, should I say, discovery records, or if they're actually texts that I just haven't seen yet. If you know something about this case, you know that this is around the time that Charles was suspicious that something was going on. He checks his emails and sees that Lori has sent a fake email to Chad Daybell from pretending to be him, asking him to come over and stay and edit a book. And so Charles automatically knows that something's going wrong, and he's reaching out to Adam Cox, and Adam Cox is the only one that's responsive. He goes on to attach the family history documents that have a breakdown of the entire family, rating and friends, rating them light and dark. These documents came from Chad Daybell to Lori Vallow. So these are the kind of things that Charles found and sent off to different members of the family, saying he was very concerned about Lori's mental state. And so Janice talks about how Charles called her and told her he wanted his stuff. And regarding Lori's mental state, Janice said, well, she went to a psych eval. She didn't get committed, so shrug, you know. She added that later on the cops will think that Charles was nuttier than Lori. Sure, because Charles was vocalizing the things he was seeing written down in emails between these 2 characters, Lori and Chad. So of course it sounded nutty. So after Charles found the fake email, which seemingly showed Lori was having an affair with Chad Daybell, the emails between Charles and Alex Cox are shown. I don't think I'd ever seen those. Emails between Charles threatening Lori to tell that he's going to tell Tammy Daybell. Those we knew about, that they existed. but that he was going to reach out to Tammy on Monday. You see some little glimpses of these on the screen. So that was new to actually see the emails again. I don't know if Netflix mocked them up or not. So we see Charles threatening Lori with telling Tammy about the affair, and that she replied back, "They're both my friends," and she threatened to block Charles. Adam Cox was planning an intervention on Lori. Charles was not going to attend the intervention, but he spearheaded it. He booked the flights. And Adam Cox was going to stay with his parents, but apparently everybody got wind of it. And then a text I hadn't seen before from Alex to Lori: "Have fun and get rid of Ned already." We know that Ned was Charles. Then we see a text from Charles to Adam the day that he went up to pick up JJ for school, and it's ominous. It's like Alex is here. Episode 2, entitled Dark Spirits, opens with Charles being shot at Lori's condo by Alex Cox. Phoenix reporter Justin Lum covered the Charlesville case from the very beginning, and he, like many true crime investigative reporter, has the spiderweb spaghetti collage on the wall trying to make sense of this crazy case. The documentary shows quite a bit of the body cam footage and the police interview footage surrounding Charles's murder with the BS lies. All this footage I've covered here on my channel, so I'm not going to go through that in depth. See, Alex sitting right here claims to have been beamed in the head by Charles. Not a mark on the back of his skull in this picture. Do you think he's been hit with a baseball bat? Hell no. Janice gives her version of what she heard from Lori and Alex, that Charles forgot his phone, and that Lori told her mother that she found stuff on Charles's phone, implying that he was cheating, and that he came back in the house, and that Lori was running around with Charles's phone, and they were started to fight, and that the fight between Alex and Charles then woke Tylee up from her room, and that Janice does not believe that Tylee would lie for Lori. She's like, "She's a teenager. Sorry, Janice. Tylee would lie for Lori. It's called self-preservation." And you can see, in my opinion, many times on the body cam and in the police station where Tylee is lying for her mother. And then Janice said that Lori told her that she heard the gunshots but didn't freak out. And then they show a police interview basically saying the exact opposite, that she heard the gunshots and freaked out. So then we go back to Colby, and he talks about how he's at work and he gets a call from Lori that Charles has suffered a heart attack and died. So Colby walks into the townhouse later on, and Alex is sitting there with the bandage on his head, and Colby says he's later shocked to find out that Alex had shot Charles. It wasn't a heart attack, and he'd been lied to. He says that he saw Tylee, and Tylee cried to him when she saw him, and that she said that Charles and Al had a fight and that Al shot him. And we see the body cam footage of Alex saying, "He hit me with a bat, and so I shot him twice." And then we are shown Lori's superficial text to Charles's son regarding his death, where she tells him that he's passed away, and then she's unresponsive to their questions. They're shocked, they're asking her questions, and she's unresponsive to them. Lori basically lies to them, tells them she's waiting on the medical examiner, but she knew good and well how he died. That was a lie. And then she turns around and tells JJ's school that it was a self-inflicted wound by Charles. In other words, that he had hurt himself, which was yet another lie. At this point, Colby says that Kelsey tells him not to have anything to do with his entire family after this. We hear the audio recording of Lori Vallow calling the insurance claims department. Again, all of these things are up on my channel in other videos, and so I'm not going to go into it here. She's basically told that she's not the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy. We see the text between Chad and Lori regarding the life insurance claim, and there's a weird text, and I hadn't seen it before, where Chad is replying to Lori, and Chad texts probably another step in bringing down the Gandations, especially Brandon. I don't know what that is. Does anybody know what that is? Gandiantons. What's a Gandation? I don't know. You know, they made up stuff all the time, so who knows what that was. Probably some nonsense from Beyond the Veil. And then just like that, Lori up and moves. So Colby talks about his last goodbye with Tylee. Tylee also cried to Janice and then said, "I'm okay, I just needed to cry," after she had a good cry on Janice's shoulder, and then they left for Rexburg. In retrospect, Colby said at this point, Lori was just playing manipulative games with everybody. And since his own wife was going through a high-risk pregnancy, he just chose to focus on his new nuclear family. After time went on, Colby had casual texts with Tylee, and something seemed off to him, and he contacted her on her birthday, and her texts did not seem like they were coming from her. So Colby confronted Lori regarding the weird Tylee text and that they didn't seem like they were written by her, and he said it didn't sound like Tylee. And Colby finally gets around to reading Charles Vallow's emails. I think his wife actually went and digging and read them and then freaked out because the forwarded family history documents, that email that had the attachment rating Lori's friends and family as light and dark, coming from Chad Daybell, had his own wife Kelsey rated as a 3 dark, and Tylee was rated as a 4-1 dark. And she asks, who the hell is Chad Daybell? The documentary cuts to Alex and Lori's text regarding working on the zombies, and then there's discussion about who the final zombie was. Alex was guessing one person, and it turns out it was Brandon. And then you cut to Brandon Boudreau. Brandon Boudreau was Lori's niece's husband, and he's shown on body cam video talking about how someone had shot at him from a car while he was in a car, and that the car was a gray Jeep Wrangler. So someone has tried to take a shot at Brandon, and then you see these texts at the same time going on, or before, going on about how Brandon was the final zombie. Cut to Julie Rowe talking about Tammy Daybell, and Chad had told her a weird trance story about his wife Tammy being in an auto accident and seeing her spirit leave her body, and commenting to Julie, "I just don't think my plan can move forward until the spouses are dead." So now we know what Julie Rowe will likely testify regarding Chad Daybell, if she's called by the state, if she's called in any of the trials. And then we're shown Chad's text talking about how Tammy is in limbo and a level 3 demonic entity named Viola has entered her body. So he's texting about his own wife, the mother of his 5 children, talking about how there's a level 3 demonic entity named Viola in her body, and he was trying to hasten her departure. And then, wouldn't you know it, Tammy Daybell ends up dying in her bed. Coincidence, right? Don't think so. And then Kay Woodcock decides she wants to talk to her nephew and gives him a call and is unable to reach him. And after multiple unsuccessful attempts to reach J.J. Vallow, she has a welfare check performed on the location that she receives because Lori buys a ring using Charles's credit card, and Charles is dead. So we get to see the welfare checks, we get to see the audio recordings, the body cams of the welfare checks. Again, all this is on my channel, so I'm not going to get deep into it. You're already following this case, you know exactly what happens, and then we go running up into episode 3 called A Mother Knows. Justin Lum said he got a message in his inbox of 666 photos of Chad and Lori's wedding in Kauai that was sent to him. It's just kind of odd, 666, right? And Colby was insulted, he said, because she was in Kauai without his siblings, and he knew something was wrong, but he thought how she had spent, in his opinion, her whole life protecting her kids. He just couldn't fathom that she'd done something to the kids. Lori does a runner with Chad Daybell after the welfare check on her property, and she cannot produce JJ. She and Chad run off to Kauai, and she's given a certain amount of time to produce the children. She fails to do so, and so she is extradited back to the mainland to face charges. There's video of Lori rolling her eyes at her first bail hearing, and Colby's there. He noted her strange behavior at the hearing, how she was smiling at the Woodcocks, and that Colby stared down Chad Daybell after the hearing was over. Lori went off to Madison jail, and we get to hear the audio recording between Lori and Colby, and he is just beside himself telling her, "You're not the same mom I know." It's quite eerie to hear the recording where she's asking him, this is that night where he's confronting her. She's like, "What is it that you think I've done?" She's very cold. Colby also said she talked about Abraham and Isaac. If you know that biblical story, it's talking about sacrifice, where God had asked Abraham to test his faith, to sacrifice his son Isaac. And then right when he goes to do it, God gives him a pass. He's proven his faith. What's really creepy to use that as some kind of example of something. Janice speaks of Lori calling from jail and telling her the kids are fine and that she would never hurt her kids, and that Janice said she believed Lori knew where they were at that time, and so that's why she did all these pro-Lori interviews. Essentially that she thought that Lori was just hiding the kids and that she knew where the kids were. She admits now that the detractors were all right and that she was wrong and that she doesn't know anything. At this point in the story, Lori's in jail for not producing the kids. And Chad hasn't been charged with anything. But the FBI, using their CAST system, using cell phone pings, GPS data, text, emails, etc., showing all the analysis of where all the players were during important times of the case, were able to get a search warrant and to search the Daybell property. So they were looking at where the kids were last seen, where all the suspects were, etc., on certain dates. And they searched the Chad Daybell property. He's actually there on the property in the driveway, I believe, for most of the search. And they uncover human remains on the property. And allegedly he then speeds away from his home and the police cars floor it. They catch him, they arrest him, and they take him into custody. The FBI contacted Colby and told him they'd arrested Chad Daybell and that human remains were found on the property. And Colby tells us, "In my heart, I know it was them." Then we hear the recorded jail calls, audio, from the driveway between Chad and Lori while the authorities were searching the Daybell property. All this is up on my channel, so I'm not going to go over it again. Essentially, Lori's calling Chad from jail, and he's sitting there watching them search, and he's telling them that they're searching. It's a very odd audio. Chad sounds defeated. Surely he had to know that the FBI was going to find what was on the property. We also hear Colby's call to Lori, where he's accosting her. "Are you sorry for me or my siblings? They were harmed. I can't even fathom what happened. I miss my family." And then she sits there and agrees with him. "Oh, so do I. How can I not miss them? They're my babies." She's just unwell, in my opinion. Not in touch with reality. But I'm not going to get into the legal definition of sanity and insanity. That's for the courts to decide whether she was sane when she did it or didn't do it. Whether, at the time of the event, if she is sane enough to go through a trial. And if she gets the death penalty, if there is a death penalty, if she's sane enough to be executed. There's always 3 different points that a person can be insane legally. And I'm not going to go there. But I'm going to tell you that I think that she was unwell before meeting Chad Daybell. But if she ever goes to trial, it's up to the jury to determine what level of mitigation her mental state will have, because I don't think they have the insanity as a regular defense in that state. The documentary goes over the preliminary hearing, which I've already covered in depth here on the channel. So I'll link it in the channel description section. Documentary shows body cam videos of the welfare check, the text that Chad sent Tammy Daybell on September 9th, 2019 at 11:52. We call it the raccoon text, talking about shooting a raccoon, burning it, burying it on his property. This text was sent one day after Tylee was last seen alive. And also using the Pet Cemetery text info, the FBI, using that cast analysis system, was able to dig in the area in front of the dog statue and in a few other places, and they found the remains of the children in the areas that the phones were pinging. Is that not crazy what we can do with technology today? It's amazing. It really is. The documentary also goes over Melanie Gibbs' testimony on the stand, how Melanie testified that Chad had contacted her and told her not to pick up the phone for the police. And then later they called her and asked her to lie and say that JJ was with her. The documentary also plays Melanie Gibbs' secretly recorded audio where she calls Chad and Lori and confronts them about why they asked her to lie and say that JJ was with her, and their excuses regarding that, where she's asking where JJ is and they tell her that JJ's fine, that he's well. And then we wrap up to where Colby is confronting his mother after the bodies have been recovered, and Lori is saying, I've done everything to protect them. I love you, but you don't know. Like, you don't have a full understanding of the situation. Like, there's some greater reason that these poor children were on Chad Daybell's property. Her mother, Janice, says those two beautiful kids had so much to offer and experience, and she knows that Lori was responsible now. She thinks that Lori will be in jail for the rest of her life, and she says, I don't see any reason to pile on. She's in jail. There's going to be justice done. That's what Janice says. And Colby says without his nuclear family, he would have died from sadness. And that's pretty much where the documentary leaves us, because this is told from Colby's point of view. At this point, both Chad and Lori are in jail, waiting their various trials. Lori was deemed incompetent to stand trial, then she was restored to competency, and now she may be in limbo again. So it's likely that the trials will end up being severed. It's always easier for the prosecution to try the cases together in a conspiracy case, but at this point, we just don't know if they'll be severed. There likely will be a change of venue. We'll just have to wait and see. So I just wanted to stick my head back into this Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow coverage, and I will stay on top of it going forward. I did the full Ted Bundy series, so that took up a couple months worth of time. I recommend this series. I really recommend it for folks that already know what's going on. I couldn't imagine coming at this series not knowing anything, because there would be a whole lot to take in and a whole lot of players to cover, and then it's only coming from Colby's viewpoint. So you really probably wouldn't get as much out of it as if you knew a lot about the case already. So I give it 2 thumbs up. So if you want to hear more about this case, subscribe, check out my previous videos on this case. Hit the like button, and without further ado, have an excellent day.